digital instrument development for Define Your Journey. Hi, in this video I'd like to talk about our process of developing some of the custom digital instruments for Define Your Journey. How we started out by creating lanterns and instruments for live in-person performances on a previous version of the project, and how we've adapted when everything moved to an online space. My name is Charles Matthews. I'm working as a creative technologist on the project. And just to audio describe myself, I'm a white man in his late 30s sporting a beard and glasses, a very poorly lit rooftop here in Montreal. And unfortunately quite windy as well, but I'm out here because I'm hoping to give something of a practical demonstration of these lanterns and how they connect. So as I'm speaking, this one is lighting up in blue and purple to respond to my voice with a row of LEDs. Now, this is not intended to be a technical demo, but be able to demonstrate how some of this works, describe a bit more broadly how it works, and in particular I'd quite like to highlight how we've noticed that addressing various angles on the accessibility and other technical issues are really crossing over with creative decisions. And I'd also like to talk a little bit at the end about how we've been able to extend this indirectly as an open source project, or certainly with the intention of making this an open source project by sharing our code and ideas with another organization that I'm involved with called Blurring the Boundaries Arts here in Montreal. And in doing so, share how we've been trying out some of these ideas in practice as Blurring the Boundaries Arts have been meeting up with people online. But for now, let's rewind for a moment. Unfolding on the screen now is a video clip of some of the circuit boards that I was just playing with, this time inside paper lanterns mounted on trees in Saint-Viateur Park in Montreal. The lanterns are swaying gently in the wind as the camera moves through them, and they're responding to the sound of Joanne Cox's cello in different colours depending upon the notes she plays. And the texture is changing as the echoes on the cello pulsate as well. There are oranges, pinks, blues, and these are reflected faintly on the leaves of the trees. This piece represents the Dragon's Cave in Define Your Journey, and also appeared in the Scratch performance in London the year before. This was just toward the start of the lockdown, and in an alternative timeline, we probably would have been sitting in a rehearsal studio in London doing this. Pretty much every collaboration was becoming remote at that time. It presented us with quite an exciting challenge to work on this long distance. The sound was coming from a clip that Joanne had sent me over email, and we knew that it was going to take some time to do this live. All the same, it was quite magical to see and hear it coming to life outside. As well as responding to the sound of Joanne's electric cello, we could use a microphone that we would pass around to participants in a workshop, for example. And we also started work on an iPad app, really in its early stages, but something that could be used to choose the colours that was shown on the lanterns and the stage lights. In this next section, we're going to see a really early version of this, and I'll keep the sound of the other piece running underneath just for a bit of musical context. So as the trees and the lanterns fade out, we return to the roof, this time a split screen. I'm holding an iPad on the left, and on the right hand side there's a single lantern, again gently swaying in the wind. Along the screen I've got columns, which will probably be familiar to anybody who's used ThumbJam before, but in different colors. And if I slide my finger along the screen, I can play different notes, and depending on how high up my finger lands on the screen, I'm also changing the volume of those notes. And the screen is responding by getting lighter and darker. On the other side of the roof, I've got a lantern set up to reflect these changes. Now, there are a few different places we could go with this, and it's worth mentioning that we've been working on some instruments for physical performance that we'll have to cover in another video. These ones are using a proximity sensor or various other sensors and switches, but what's nice about it is that they use the same boards as the lanterns. So they've got the lights already, they've got the microbit for radio control. And by doing this, we've already got spares and we're testing the equipment out so that when we're ready to try physical performance in the same space again, it won't be such a big leap. But what I'd really like to focus on now is how things have progressed from that iPad app into playing online. This was a way of us setting the colors for different notes, but it wasn't really quite where we wanted it to be in terms of customizing things, and passing an iPad around in a workshop is not quite the same as accessing something through a browser in your own time. Now, as we move development onto the web, as well as the custom interfaces that we made for the iPad, we've had the opportunity to play around with existing elements such as the color pickers built into the web browser. And one of the advantages of using these is that they're compatible with screen readers, voice control, and other interfaces, as long as we don't close those options off, in contrast to a lot of more specialist software that I might use in this context. So I'm going to use a color picker built into Google Chrome. I've got 3 boxes on the screen, 1, 2, and 3, and those correspond with lanterns behind me. As I click on number 1, it brings up a gradient from black to red, so I'll drag the mouse pointer up to the right-hand side of this color picker to create a red lantern. Number 2, I'll do the same, moving over to red, and then there's a slider in the middle that I'll use to move this over to pink and then blue. Finally, for number 3, I'll do the same thing once more, and I'll move number 3 over to yellow. Underneath the color pickers, there's a start button, and if I click this, then lantern number 1 should start responding to my voice. So with the color that I've chosen, the intensity of the sound is now changing the intensity of the lantern. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that this is an inherently accessible interface, and it might well not be the best way to set the color for the lanterns, but it is fairly easy in terms of code to swap out for other options, and that's one of the most important things about Access, is having the options and not closing them off. This is where we start crossing over with the meetups that Blowing the Boundaries have been hosting. As I've been speaking, a video has been cross-fading in, myself and GiftTuber on a Zoom call, playing with something that's not a million miles off what we were just looking at. We've been trying to set up some sort of regular session to get people together to play music online, and over the last few weeks we've just been making a point of trying things out that are not necessarily finished. In this case, it's just the 2 of us, and almost by accident, this was the first time that we got to control the lanterns over the internet while making music. We wanted a very clear interface for this, so on the right-hand side of the screen, we had a gradient from blue to red, much like the color picker. And we're moving our mouse pointers around this to make the sounds, not in any particular scale. Sounds coming through the website rather than the Zoom call, but we've kept the video on so that we can communicate more generally. So there's a direct connection between what's going on the screen and the lantern on my end of the call on the bottom. We've been trying out so many different ways of playing online using webcam tracking, mouse pointers, touch screens, anything we can get our hands on really. And yet this gave us a different focal point. It's really exciting and actually helped us engage with a few more people with a bit more of a visual feel to the sessions. So in the final clip I'm going to play, we'll see something quite different, moving away from using the lanterns and into painting. It's another split screen situation. So on the left we have the first person's perspective, on the right we have audience perspective. At the moment there are other people on the call playing and there's nothing going on in the first person's perspective. So both screens are the same aside from the traces from earlier on the session for the audience. We wanted to explore a situation where if you're drawing and playing, your sounds and your visuals will actually be quite different, quite easy to distinguish, especially if there are 10 other people on the call. This actually makes it harder to interact directly because you don't know exactly what other people are going to be seeing and hearing. Some people found that quite counterintuitive, and it's something that we need to think about if we're going to move forward with an idea like this, how we would set up the expectations. First person perspective is coming to life as the person who's recording the call is starting to play. We hope will become an open source project. I'm just starting to play around with exchanging ideas. It's been quite interesting to do this indirectly, to be able to make a copy of the project at Blurring the Boundaries and take it in our own direction without worrying that we're going to change things in the main project and that things can be integrated if they work. Here as the improvisation is kind of coming to a peak, we have a few people playing at once and lines are starting to emerge between the different players. It's like the software is encouraging people to play together. So this has been a really different direction from how we started out. So it's going to be interesting to see this perhaps combined with the lanterns down the line. Thanks to Arts Council England for supporting the further R&D of Define Your Journey. Define Your Journey is supported by Disability Arts Online and Together 2012. Previous support from Help Musicians UK's Do It Differently Fund enabled the design and development of radio-controlled lighting, which contributed to this project. Blurring the Boundaries Arts online meetings are part of the Canadian Accessible Musical Instrument Network, which is supported in part by funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, with thanks to the University of Calgary and Vibrofusion Lab. For more information on Define Your Journey and the team behind it, go to cello.johansonia.live.